Welcome to the Long Range Pursuit Podcast, presented by Gunwerks, where we learn about and share long-range shooting techniques, science, and gear.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Long Range Pursuit Podcast. This is an instructor's corner, Ask Aaron kind of combination here. Today we're going to be talking about curriculum and technology and how they've developed with the advancement of long-range shooting. And so we've got, no one better than the CEO of Gunwerks right here. Aaron's going to hit us up with this. So thanks for being here, Aaron, and taking time to hit this with me. My first thing is just, where did Gunwerks start? Let's get right into it. As far as you've already created LRU, where did you start getting people on target? How did you get people on target?
So we started Gunwerks in 2006. We delivered our first shooting systems in 2007, and we started our first long-range university course in the summer of 2007. So the system came online, and then shortly thereafter, we started filling the need for training and education on how to use it. So the state of the industry at that time was drop charts. That was kind of the thing, the sticking the drop chart on the side of your stock and go to the field and go hunting. That was how people were doing long-range corrections.
How are they getting a drop chart? Like, maybe explain that.
Well, I think...
How did you guys get it for your guns?
Well, we developed a software program that used a ballistic solver that would take your inputs and your truing data, and it would get you a true BC, and then we would calculate for those intervals, your holdover solution.
So that's already way more advanced than just your dope card.
Yeah. I have a small vendetta against dope cards.
Why?
Because you can't shoot enough data to really draw a conclusion about what's there. And then once that data's done, you have no way to extrapolate or to correct that data for a different shooting condition. So it's essentially worthless unless you're at that location that you started with.
So and let's not get into it. We'll come back to it. The BDC, to me, is a dope card on a turret.
It's not a dope card. It is a drop chart. And I'm gonna clarify the difference. A dope card is data on previous engagement. Mm-hmm. So essentially, think you go to the range, you shoot at 100 yards, you dial or hold until you've got the amount, and you say this much.
Right.
And then you go to 200 yards, you dial or hold until you have it adjusted, and then you write down the amount. You go to 300 yards, write it down. 400 yards, write it down. That is a dope card. That's data on previous engagement. So now you have this card that says for these distances, here's your thing. The difference between that and a drop chart is a drop chart is generated by a ballistic solution based on your inputs.
Okay.
And that trude is much more precise and representative of what your gun is going to do. And guess what? Now you can have the data for 125 or 150. Or if you go to a different set of environmental conditions, you can plug in a different elevation and temperature and get a drop chart for that.
So you're talking about an ever-changing drop chart, though, where a BDC, again, like, let's take away our rangefinders, the smart rangefinders right now, and you're talking BDC. Mm-hmm. What's the difference then?
Well, so a BDC, again, the shape, the curve, the trajectory curve of a BDC is mathematically generated based on your inputs. And if we true your inputs so that at a certain point, say like this afternoon, in that temperature and pressure, if we true the inputs so that that temperature pressure equals impact points that are exactly what you're shooting, now it's trued, and now those inputs can be used in any shooting scenario at different elevation temperature, different incline, different wind, etc. So how that would work with a BDC is, and we used to do this, you're going to go to Tajikistan, you'd build a BDC for 14,000 feet, 20 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and you can do that because you have these input values that are portable into a calculation that works in any set of conditions. If you have a drop chart, you have nothing. Like, you can't take your drop chart that you made in Cody and go to Tajikistan and have any expectation for how it's going to change and what you're supposed to do.
So what's the difference between making a dope card that has those inputs? Like, I shoot and it's real evidence that I'm hitting targets. And this is a question we get all the time.
This is why I have a vendetta, is because there's so many people that are still promulgating this idea of a dope card and its usefulness. There's so many people out there still that are doing this, that it is screwing up the entire, education system around long-range shooting.
Well, then, again, I don't understand between...
The only time that shooting data should be recorded and used is when you true your trajectory profile. That's the only time it has any value. After that, nothing. There's no value in those things.
So a dope card can't be transformed into that, though, is what you're saying. Like, why can't I shoot hard data and say at 800 yards, this is my dope, and these are my atmospherics, and this is my muzzle velocity, and my dope card has all that information that I wrote down.
Okay.
Now, I guess then you're making...
Now I'm going to go to Tajikistan. How do you use it?
Well, I guess you'd have to make a drop chart based on that dope card.
So you would shoot in Tajikistan and make a new drop chart?
Well, technically, yeah. I mean,
that's why it's stupid.
But yeah. Okay. So, but what if you make a BDC turret in Cody, Wyoming?
Okay.
And now we go to Tajikistan and we don't have our stuff.
So this is the difference between a dope card and a drop chart. A BDC turret is just a drop chart. You've calculated a ballistic solution for different distances, right, based on a set of input conditions. And two of those that are super important is what's your muzzle velocity and what's your BC. And those are the values that we're measuring or truing so that the calculation matches the actual results in some set of conditions.
So the only difference, in my understanding, between a dope card and a drop chart or a BDC turret is that you have trued and then created the card.
The difference is a dope card is data that's recorded based on your shooting.
Yep.
And a drop chart is data that is calculated by a ballistic solver.
Okay.
And a drop chart becomes better once you've trued the inputs.
Sure. But why can't you make a dope card off of that? That's what I'm saying. It's like a BDC to me is you have created a drop chart.
You have to just be really careful on your nomenclature. Dope is data on previous engagement. So it's data that you record based on a shooting result.
Yeah. Okay. No,
that's
that makes
the difference.
Because what guys will do is they'll get on the Revic app and they'll create the conditions that they're going to shoot in, and they'll do what people call, and now I'm seeing the difference here, is they call a dope card.
It's not a dope card. That is a drop chart.
Okay, so interesting. I mean, I've never really realized there's a difference between the different terminology there.
Well, it's really important because a drop chart is, when it's trued, is absolutely perfect in all conditions, in all distances, based on the mathematics. I mean, perfect enough for our shooting.
Yeah.
A dope chart isn't. You make me a dope chart every 100 yards to 1,000 yards at our Burlington range at 4,000 feet on an 80-degree day, and then we go hunting elk this fall, and it's a crisp September morning or October morning. It's 20 degrees, and we're at 11,000 feet. And you've got a 20-degree down angle. Your dope card is worthless.
Okay.
And in my opinion, a drop chart in a lot of ways has a lot of limitations.
Well, that drop chart, unless it's malleable, is useless.
We used to do, we did a G7 program that was available online, and I did it. A lot of it was just to help people true and help people explore ballistic parameters and stuff. But one of the cool things that we did with that was we had a printout, And it didn't just print one set of conditions. You could do like a complex one. So it had on the one card, it was for an elevation and temperature combination, and it had 0, 10, 20, 30, 40 degree incline with yards every 25 yards. And so it was like this, and then it would print out 6 different elevation and temperature combinations. And so you take that thing, fold it up, put it in your pouch. That actually had enough information that you could interpolate into a solution in almost any condition.
Sounds a lot like dope cards.
No. That's not data on previous engagement. I didn't go shoot data in every elevation, temperature, and incline condition. Right? That was calculated data. So that is a drop chart.
So with the next argument, and let's say my argument would be, I have hard evidence right here. Here's what technology's telling me.
Mm-hmm.
So then it takes a lot of trust to just trust what the technology is saying you're going to hit with.
Yes.
So what do you say to guys who are not breaking that barrier of trust?
Get with the Century. Or don't shoot over 400 yards. There's your 2 choices.
Yeah, but okay, get with Century and getting the BR4 or
guys have been doing ballistic calculations and analysis sophisticated enough to send an artillery shell into a town 20 miles away for way over 100 years
with government funding.
No. I mean, fine, whatever. But it's like that is very simple stuff. And you go look at the sophistication of those ballistic calculations and algorithms and compare them to what we have now. Like we blow that stuff way out of the water. So if you can't get to that point where you can trust a calculated solution based on true input data, then you should not be shooting long range.
That's fair enough, right there.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You need to know how to use a ballistic calculator. You need to know how to transfer it to a rangefinder that can do that. And we'll get into some of that. I'm just trying to think. A BDC without our technology, without the BR4, can you call that?
So let's talk about a drop chart, whether it's on a BDC on a turret or it's just a card that you printed out that has your drop calculation.
Yep.
Right? Or a screenshot of a table solution on the app. Like those are all fixed for a certain set of shot parameters. You know, cartridge and profile inputs plus environmental conditions plus shot vector.
And no angle.
Well, shot vector includes angle. Like
okay.
you can put that in there, but like it's fixed.
Okay.
The problem is, what do you do when you have a different set of conditions, whether it's environmental conditions or shot vector? That is the real challenge with a BDC turret. So let's talk history of Gunwerks. So we pushed BDC turrets that were trued, so they were based on trued data, right? Not book data. They were based on a trued input.
Yep.
So now our ballistic calculation will match. And I mean, we're talking it'll match tits on, you know, as far as you would want to shoot an animal.
Yeah.
Right?
And before we get too much deeper, now just to make it 100% clarified, is a dope card is data on previous engagement. A drop chart is after you have trued and you've created a drop chart.
Yeah.
So let's take dope card out of the equation completely now.
Yeah, I actually think that should be a really simple qualification to evaluate the training, the training knowledge and value of a influencer or, you know, course or manufacturer is if they are dealing with or doing or pushing any type of dope card or including dope cards into any aspect of your shooting work stream, you can automatically disqualify from them as somebody of authenticity that you should follow or waste any time or money on. Absolutely. Like that is an instant qualifier. Dope cards, they're 50 years behind the times.
Yeah.
Drop charts, that's a different story. There might be a hint of goodness there. And if they're talking about truing their inputs so that drop chart has a validated trajectory, now we're talking about the real shit.
Sure.
And that's the basis right there, a true set of inputs and a calculated output, whether you put it in a table format or a single shot solution, which we can talk about more.
Mhm.
That is the fundamental step that's required to shoot at distance. And I'm talking distance, we're talking beyond, say, 500 yards ish, because you can get away with a lot of stuff close.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back to this history, we introduced this true drop chart, put on a turret, call it a BDC, a bullet drop compensator, right? So you got this drop chart on a turret on a rifle system that's been validated, everything's good. You hand that over to a shooter, like what's he need to do to be successful? So he's got to make sure it's zeroed for him, because some people have different point of impact, so fine. So he zeroes it. So we're starting out at the same. All of a sudden, he's got a little error because his conditions that he zeroed in maybe didn't match the turret, right? And then he goes and he shoots 400 yards and it's freaking in the vital zone, 500-yard vital zone. He gets out in that 700-800 yards and he's not quite in the vital zone. Well, now probably what's showing up is a difference in temperature and pressure, right? So now he's stuck with this, what do I do to make this work? And before we introduced the BR2, right, which was in 2011, so we had about 5 years there. Before we did that, it was just dumb rangefinder and a couple rules of thumb. So we would teach a rule of thumb for incline. We would teach a rule of thumb for pressure and temperature. And I think if I remember, what we used to teach was for every 1,000 feet of elevation or 20 degrees at 1,000 yards, you had 2 clicks of correction. So if it's less dense, you need less correction. If it's more dense, you need more correction. And so really quickly you could go through, well, I've got a 5,000 foot, 50-degree turret, and we're at 10,000 feet. Well, that's 5,000 feet change. That's 10 clicks, right? And 10,000 is less dense than 5,000. So that's dial the range and then take 10 clicks out of it. That's 2.5 minutes, 25 inches. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So that was how we would teach people in the LRU classes. And really, you back up to 750, it's only 1 click. And then you start doing some, okay, well, I go to 10,000, but it gets colder, where I'm lower, but it's hotter. And
canceling each other out.
Yeah, you pick your turret just right so that out to 600-700 yards, you didn't have to do a lot of corrections. Most of the time, you didn't have to do any, for small changes, plus 2,000 or 3,000 feet of elevation. So that was the approach that we took there. And then when it came to incline, we would give guys some quick rules of thumb for reducing that shoot-to range. It was rudimentary, but it got people, 15-degree down angle solutions out to 500 yards, ish, without any issues.
I like where we're going. I'm going to back us up just a little bit. And again, just for my own understanding, but where I'm seeing the big misunderstanding, maybe it's just me, but now I get it, is people are interchanging or they're using the same term, dope card and drop chart, as the same thing. They're saying it as the same thing. And so that's where my mind was even coming right into this. But as soon as you say that, now it makes clear sense. Okay. So now the next thing to me is that you've created these drop charts. I didn't realize that right in the beginning you were creating BDCs right off the bat.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was the next big step.
You go look at the patent I filed in 2005. It was for our program that stepped a user through a system to true his trajectory without understanding what was going on. And to build a BDC turret that had a wind indicator on it. Like this was in 2005, before we even produced that first, long-range system. And we started optics company at the same time. So when we launched, I think we delivered in 2007, that complete system. We launched with an optics package, a customized ballistic turret, the software system that would feed that, mark the turrets based on a ballistic calculation, the rifle system, and ammo. Like it was a long ways down the road in 2007.
Yeah, that's wild. And what was the wind indicator?
So the way that we used to do that was you would put like a 10-mile-an-hour wind hold on the turret.
Yeah, okay.
And so if you dialed 500 yards, it would tell you 2 minutes.
Okay, yep.
And it's really cool, but it's not technically correct. So you go to different air densities, that number's not the same. You shoot on any type of incline, the number's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So when we introduced the BR2, we pulled that wind number into the calculation. Basically, my goal with wind is eliminate all the variables you can so that the only thing that you're guessing at is the wind speed. And so for us we onboarded that wind calculation into the smart device. So now, no matter what the conditions are, that number is the exact number. So it just minimizes that extra little bit of error.
Okay. Well, okay, so let's go back to the drop chart and then turn it into a BDC. When we're talking like how our curriculum, how we do it at schools, we're teaching people how to use a ballistic calculator, our Revic Ops app. And it isn't until day 2 that we actually have them exercise some of the BDC.
Yeah.
Because we want them to know how to use a compass and a map before they use the GPS type of thing. How did you get guys learning? Did they know MOA before they knew BDC? Guys coming to your school and stuff, did they?
No, at that time, that is the prevalence of ballistic apps on mobile devices did not exist at that time. Like there weren't any.
Like they were coming with a print off from the website.
Perfect. Yeah, that's yep, a real drop chart.
Mm.
We had a Windows Mobile 6 app that we made, which was actually really good. We made that probably at about 2009, I think, maybe 2010 it was public, but right in that range.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically made it so that we could validate field solutions in testing the rangefinder. And I think there was one other company that had a solver. I think it was Horus. And they were doing something for the military.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you could get it through Night Force, Horus, like it was a little connection there. That was it. There was no applied ballistics. There was no Hornady app. There was no shooter app. There was nothing. Like there was that Horus program. There was our program. You had to buy this little PDA thing to install it on. That was it. That was all that existed in the world. It was a crazy, like way different time.
Mm-hmm.
Handful of online programs. I remember JBM existed back then and was probably one of the better options for an online program. Like there just wasn't a lot of options. So when we brought our system online, the idea was that like you didn't have to know any of that. Here's a system, it's turnkey, dial it, shoot it, go. And that's the way that existed for quite a long time. This idea of teaching, the derivations of a ballistic solution and how to use an app, to set up a rifle and to true a rifle, like that stuff didn't happen really until about maybe 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. 9, 10, like not very many years ago. So for the first decade, we didn't do that.
I came on board 4 years ago, and we were diving into some of the Hornady app stuff until we were just developing our Revic app. And now we do everything.
Well, we had the Revic app as a loading device for the PMR. We hadn't created the ballistic solution part of it yet.
Okay.
So we were using Hornady there for a few years and then switched to our Revic product.
Okay. Well, that's what I've loved about the curriculum now. I didn't see it before, right? It was you already changing it to what we have now. But as guys come in and they learn how to use a ballistic calculator right off the bat. So now they actually know why versus just dial and shoot.
And how.
Why and how.
Yep.
And to me,
and you think about it, the goal of level 1 is to teach how to put together a long-range system that's not a Gunwerks system.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, that's the goal.
Because you can use it on anything.
The outcome should be you should feel comfortable validating the trajectory on any of your rifles or another rifle system that you put together.
So in a 3-minute description, could you describe how someone could do that? Like what we do in level 1?
Yeah. We show you how a ballistic program works. We teach you about what the input variables are, what they mean, and how sensitive your solution is to variances.
Can you say what those input variables are?
Well, the main ones are like BC, muzzle velocity, sight height, that kind of stuff.
Twist rate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we go through all that stuff so everybody understands what those are. And so now you're familiar with how to use the app, you're familiar with the inputs, and then we'll teach you how to go find them or to collect those inputs. And so we'll show you the process. Start with these inputs, and then we'll show you the process of calculating a solution and shooting and collecting the results of that and inputting those results into a truing routine that trues up those inputs. So now you can use those inputs with any set of shot vector and environmental conditions and predict a single shot solution that is spot on. Mm-hmm. And you basically, once you go through that exercise, Q&A, hands-on, shoot, calculate, run it, it'll embed into your psyche, this is how we do it. And now you've got that skill set built that you can apply to anything in any situation.
That's what I love about level 1 is you get guys who show up and they've said, I've never dialed a turret before. I'm a holdover guy. And I'd say that is probably 70 to 80% of the guys coming in. It's a lot of them. And it's day 1, we're zeroing, we're building a profile and shooting 800 yards. We skip everything else. And obviously you've created this, this, but that's the awe factor that we get is guys are like, we're shooting 840 yards right away. Like we're not shooting anything in between. Right. And to realize that is how you true and create or find out your trajectory is awesome. And it does teach you that, holy crap, I can go home and do this on my own rifle and shoot long range fast. Yep. Guys think they need training.
They put it up on the pedestal.
Yes.
And once you have the skill set and the knowledge and the right tools, it's very straightforward.
Boom. There it is. Okay. So, that's level 1, and we've started with calculator. At the end of level 1, we introduced BDC real quick. You guys, when you kind of started the course, you were BDC right off the bat. Yep. Is that how it was?
Yep.
Just because ballistic calculator.
Yeah, we used to be able to do the bulk of the content of level 1, level 2 in a 2-day class. Now, it was intense,
fire hose.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a fire hose, but you could still get it in there. And once we've expanded on this, ballistics and ballistic parameters and ballistic program and teaching how to run that, it kind of stretches it into a territory where you can't squeeze it into 2 days. And then you start putting the progression of bench versus field and basic and advanced wind. All of a sudden that turns into 2 separate classes or 4 days worth of content.
Yeah. Well, let's bump to the next step from BDC then.
Well, first of all, the technical solution that you get from putting your input variables into the app and calculating a single shot solution, that is a better ballistic solution than a BDC.
Okay.
Right? It's more accurate
because it's updated.
Yes, it's got all the parameters and it's got all the advanced calculations built into it. The problem is, and I see this a lot, people that don't quite understand this, is they will try to take their scope and rifle, MOAs, and a ballistic app, and they'll try to go to the field and hunt with that combination. And for for some amount of the hunt scenarios, that works. They have the time. It can work. But for a lot of the hunt scenarios, and for a lot of the ones that really matter, you do not have the time to do that. You can't go back and forth. You can't take the time to do all these inputs manually and to get these solutions and then translate it. It will cost opportunities. And if you look at what a BDC turret does, a BDC turret, with all the limitations that it has, it makes a very simple and a very fast solution that converts people to success. Because most people, they're not out shooting 800-900 yards. I mean, they need something that works really fast at 500 or 600 yards. And the BDC turret excels at that. Now, there's this gap of the BDC not being spot on for different elevation and temperature conditions. The truth is, you have to move a lot for it to matter at 500. Like, you got to move 4,000 or 5,000 feet before it even matters at all. You got to have 100-degree temperature swing before it even matters at all. So out to 500, 600 yards, like, a BDC turret is a deadly device. But if you just add that little extra true up of a ballistic solution and combine that with the BDC turret. And what we call that is our Revic Smart Range, right? Or a BDC shoot-to range, right? You take that smart range and it knows what your turret was built for, and it knows what the conditions are, knows what the incline is, and it can say, hey, don't dial 450, dial 475. Or you start getting at distance, it says, don't dial 800, the line of sight distance. You need to dial 699.
And the only reason it knows that is because you gave it a baseline of what your turret was cut for.
The trued inputs and that baseline, parameter, that pressure temperature combo that it was built for.
Right.
Yep.
And are we the only ones who do that right now, or I knew we were. But...
We're the only ones that are doing it the way we do it. There's a couple patents in this space.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Leopold patent and a Bushnell patent, and they approach it just slightly differently than our method. But Leopold has licensed theirs to Leica, so you can do. There's a Leopold and a Leica solution that's reasonably close.
For BDC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say the Leica one's probably the closest thing that you can get.
Okay. Yeah, that Revic is the first, and Gunwerks Combination is the first that I have had seen where you can input what your turret was cut for. Therefore, hey, like you said.
Yeah, so we introduced that in 2011. So we had the first rangefinder that did a real-time ballistic calculation based on your input parameters, and we calculated your wind solution with that. Mm-hmm. That product was uncontested. There was no competitive product for 5 years. The first product that was semi-competitive was the Leica HDB binocular rangefinders, and we provided the online program that would create the data table. And unfortunately, that one, it just created this data table based on your ballistics, and then it would load this data table into the device and then interpolate, which means average a solution. It would basically say, oh, about there. And that's the number it would give you. But because when you're doing a BDC, most of the accuracy is carried on the BDC, let's say 75% of the accuracy is there, and only 25% of it is in the corrections. So if there's 10% error in the correction, that's only 2% error overall. So it's not as big a deal. So that system worked for quite a few years, and then we've seen like the MOA solution start showing up on all the other products that are in the marketplace. But for probably almost a decade, that BR2/BR2500 was the king for ranging and a ballistic solution.
I still see those on hunts and even NRL competition. I still see guys.
Dude, we offered that big trade-in program. Most guys didn't take us up on it. They're like, I love this product. I'm not changing it.
Yeah.
If you look back, though, that product does not do any advanced corrections. So you're not getting a vector wind. You're not getting spin drift, aero jump, Yovtos, Coriolis. You're not getting any of those. So I always felt like that product got people to between 800 and 1,000 yards. If you zeroed your gun north, if you zeroed it a half minute left, then you're kind of cheating on Yovtos effect and spin drift, and so it gets you almost to 1,000 yards. That, if you get real advanced and you can kind of do some math on your own and do this and that, you can make it work farther. But really, that turned it in. We went from a BDC solution that was 500 or 600 to now a BD solution with that corrected range, the shoot-to range, that got us nearly to 1,000. And it was a big improvement, a big investment.
Well, okay, so let's back up just a little bit to inputs in the BR2
mm-hmm.
and what you could do. Base wind versus vector wind and bracket.
Remember,
wind.
This was before smart apps.
Yeah.
So we built it so you could program it on the device. Okay. So you had to put all the parameters in. Looking through the deal.
That's how I first started teaching at Gunwerks.
Yeah, so just the basics: BC, muzzle velocity, drag profile. So you could do G1, G7. You had your sight height, your zero range. So if you think about it, we didn't have a zero angle solution. This was a zero range solution. Mm-hmm. What else was in there? That was the core ones.
Yeah, and then I'm talking more about when you're inputting wind. Like let's just jump categories real quick.
Sure. So the way that one worked was it was, you would push the button and it would give you a range, and then it would give you the shoot to range, right? Or the minutes, whichever one you had it set up for. And then you would push the button and it would take you to the wind menu, which would show you your full value crosswind speed and solution. And so if it was a, let's say it starts at a 5, you'd have 5 and you could go up to a 10 or a 15 or a 20.
And they were only 5 mile an hour increments.
You know what?
I remember.
I haven't used it for about 5 years, but that's what I remember.
I remember at teaching it, that's what it was.
Yeah.
It was 5, 10, 15. I think it went to maybe it was 30.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And so you would get that wind solution, and now you had your, your elevation and then your hold off, solution together.
And that's the part I don't remember. Is it only, it's only giving you base wind though, correct? In those
Correct.
Okay.
It's assuming either a 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock full value wind.
So can you give a quick overview on base wind versus vector wind?
Sure.
Because we'll advance from there to what we can do now.
So if you think about base wind, you're making this assumption that it's a full value wind, but you're not sure which direction. That means that you can't do aerodynamic jump. You can't do spin drift, right? You can't add it because you might add it or subtract it depending on which direction. And then you can't break down a component vector or calculate a headwind or tailwind condition. And then you can't do Coriolis. So those things can't be non-directional inputs. So just the very act of doing base wind, you can't do those advanced calculations. But if you go do an evaluation, go online or use the app and just do some test and check, you'll find that out to 800 to 1,000 yards-ish in that range, you just don't really need those. And most of our hurry-up hunting shots happen way inside of 800 yards.
I actually did some calculations yesterday just to kind of compare some of these. And I think it was at 800 yards, and it was I think it was 5 mile an hour. The difference between a base wind and a true vector wind, obviously
all those things
with all those things turned on, it was different from left to right or right to left. But the max was like 7 inches with a 7 mm is what I was using.
Yep. That sounds about right.
And that's 800 yards. You put it into 600 yards, now you're like 3 inches maybe.
Yep.
And can we shoot that good? We can anyway.
So I think what I like to explain to everybody is for 90% of the real hunting situations you're in, using the base wind solution is the best choice. It's not the best calculation, but it's the best choice because the data is accessed so quickly. Because what we do in our profile is you actually tell it a base wind value. So let's say I pick 5. Then all the smart devices that we have, when you load up and you get an elevation correction, that base wind solution is automatically there. And unlike the BR2 series, all the new rangefinders, it's there without pushing any buttons.
You don't have to go into a wind menu.
Yeah, it's just right there. Even in the smart radical scope, it's right there. So the fact that the data is there instantly means there's no delay, there's no extra buttons to push, it's just there. And out to 600-700 yards, there's no solution accuracy penalty that you pay to run that. And if you combine that with our core wind process, right? Our core wind process, essentially, you use a very precise correction method, which is a reticle in a first focal plane. Use a very precise calculation based on your inputs to get an output that is correct. So now you've got an accurate hold, and you've got a method to hold that precisely. So you've got those two variables set. Then the other two variables is guessing the wind. And if you think about the direction as a binary, it's either left or right wind. You in just a few hours, you can teach somebody all the tricks they need to be able to guess that right 95% of the time. So you're going to be able to guess the direction, done. So the only thing that's left that is the question is the speed. And we teach the bracketing 0, 5, 10, 15. We use mirage tools, vegetation tools, and wind meter tools so that even the most inexperienced, like rudimentary shooter can get there. And if he'll develop the discipline to pick one of those numbers and then apply that to the base wind, that guy is going to be deadly out to a half mile, deadly in a lot of crazy conditions that you would never expect a novice shooter or even an intermediate shooter to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So again, base wind, in my opinion, for the majority of hunting applications, combined with that very simple wind system that we've created and taught everybody how to do, right? Let's get away from all this technical crap and develop a solution that is deadly when you take it to the field. That works with base wind. Now, the challenge is sometimes there's that stupid elk on that hillside in a technical shot at 1,200 yards or more, and if you have the right dope, you can kill him. That's where you take that extra time, you dial in your shooter relative wind, clock position, and the speed. So I might do like a 1 o'clock wind at 11 miles an hour. And on all of our smart devices, as soon as you turn that on, we call that a vector wind input. So that's speed and direction. That makes a vector. As soon as you turn that on, now it enables all those advanced corrections. And then, it's correcting for elevation, for aerodynamic jump, it's headwind, tailwind, it's doing everything. So your solution is the most accurate solution that you can put together. So it minimizes that as a variable in making that shot.
Sure.
But base wind's where it's at, man. And having access to vector wind occasionally, it's handy, but it's not necessary for most of our shots.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier today that you're talking about some base wind stuff and how, you might as well just use base wind. Your average hunter, 600 yards, whatever, even 800 yards, use base wind.
Yep.
Man, when I see an antelope at 400 yards, I click in every factor in there. It's funny. You're right.
I've gone to take a shot at an antelope at 150 yards, and I went prone. So a little overkill.
Yeah. But, we teach, Murphy's Law of stacking errors, where, and I know you know this, but just for the audiences, if you shoot, let's say, a minute of angle group, 100 yards, you're shooting 1 inch, 500 yards, a 5-inch group. Let's say 600 yards. So a 6-inch group, if everything is absolutely perfect. If you shot a 1-inch group at 100, it equals a 6-inch group at 600. If you did everything perfect, okay, your fundamentals are perfect, no wind, nothing. Now add wind in there, and you're off by 5 miles an hour. You shouldn't be off by 5, but let's say you're off by 3 to 5. Now all of a sudden, instead of a 6-inch group, you've grown it to whatever it might be, 9-inch group, okay? And then you laze him, and you're hitting sagebrush 15 yards in front of him or 40 yards behind him. And now we've got this basketball-sized group on a small antelope. And so we always talk about stacking errors as if you do everything as precise as you can when we're talking precision shooting.
Yeah, basically you want to eliminate everything except for your guess on wind speed.
Yes.
Like the goal of the Gunwerks system is to eliminate every variable as a consideration for a miss except for the wind speed. And if you pick the right cartridges, you pick the right system, like you get a lot of budget. You get a lot of error budget in that wind guess.
Yeah.
Like you said, plus or minus 3 miles per hour. Easy.
And that's the question we'll get from students is they'll say, well, should I type all that in or just use the base wind? And this is what I tell them. I say, the Gunwerks answer is you type all that shiz in, right? It's like, let's use every piece of technology we can.
Yeah.
The killer's mindset, it's you use that base wind.
Yeah.
And because if you know your gun, it will do the job.
I think a big barrier to success especially for people that don't have a lot of experience. I mean, because you think about most guys, they draw 1 or 2 tags, they go hunting once or twice. Like it might take 4 or 5 years to put 10 opportunities under your belt.
Yeah.
Like I've been to Africa a dozen times. It's like I'll get 5 to 50 opportunities depending on what type of hunt we're doing. Like every trip, I could get 50 opportunities in one trip of, ranged I'll shoot, like setup.
Mm-hmm.
Like that type of experience really, really seats in this concept of keep it simple. No math. You're not going to pull out this dope card and start interpolating numbers. Like no math. Like the most math I'll do is here's my base wind is 5. Okay, well it's 2 times 5. That's 10. What's 3 times 5? 15. I can do that amount of math to multiply my hold solution, by the scaler on the wind. That's it. Like I will refuse to do any other math in the field when I'm hunting.
So you're a base wind guy, is what you're saying? Like that's
I've taken a lot of long shots. If I'm inside 700-800 yards, I 100% am a base wind guy.
That's interesting because I used to be that way, but I would use rules of thumb in there. I would say my base wind is this. I would literally make, let's call it a drop chart, and then I'd put a 5 mile an hour next to it and tape it on the inside of my scope cap.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew that was my base wind. And then I would say it's from left to right.
Yep.
There's my 1 minute hold, but I've got some spin drift, so I'm gonna go 1 minute.
No, I think that, and again, I'm gonna put you in that camp of how many animals do you shoot a year?
4, 3,
Yeah.
4. Because I'm shooting a lot.
How many of them? I was gonna say how many of them are high pressure?
1, if that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so take it. Then you're thinking a trophy like a buck or something. Now take it that and put a camera behind it, so that there is a visual record of your success or failure, and you're planning on showing the world. Now ramp up to that level of pressure and tell me what's the best method. Right? Simple. Like it's simple. I think that the more experience you get, the simpler you make your system. Your work stream needs to be smooth. Right? All you have to do is have a failure on a $50,000 hunt because you're fiddling around with all this extra stuff, and you're like, I'm done. I need something better. And that's why we own most, I would say we have the majority stake, like in high-end hunting in the world. Like you go talk to one of these Asian sheep hunters, they'll tell you 50% of their clients that come through shoot Gunwerks. There's a reason why we own that big of a stake in that space, is because these guys have done that. They have screwed up a $50,000 or $100,000 hunt, and they've gone home eating tag soup, and they need a system that works, that kills. And that's where this simple work stream, this absolute brainless system that they can execute to be successful, that's where that comes in. And that's why, you could say, well, your BR4 or your rangefinder will calculate an MOA solution. Why not use an MOA turret? Because the language of hunters is distance. Hunters don't talk about minutes or mils. Hunters talk about how far is it. And that BDC turret has given me success in situations where I would have failed with an MOA turret.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter. The output is just as precise because our shoot-to range is just as precise as an MOA solution, right? So, but the language that we talk about is yards, and how you correct is yards. It will save certain hunts. It will save situations. And that's why when we introduced the BDCs, like on a mass scale, we didn't invent them. I mean, they existed back in World War I. We didn't invent a BDC, but we introduced them on a mass scale and showed how they could be used to be very successful. We had a lot of hate. Like, we withstood a lot of hate because all the experts said, you can't do this. But as soon as you put that smart device in there, the BDC solution is just as good as an MOA solution.
Yeah.
Like, it's just as accurate, and it has the advantage of being in the distance, in the language that we communicate. My favorite is one of our high-end outfitters in Utah was telling me a story. They were sitting on a big bull. I mean, we're talking over 400, big bull, big money, big bull. They were sitting on a ridge. It slips into the timber. It's at a distance where you have to have a good solution. If I remember right, it was less than 800, but it was way out there. So they're there on the bull, and they're going to wait him out, right? Rather than put pressure on, they're just going to be patient, wait him out. That's a very smart thing. That's the way you do it sometimes with big animals. So they're there waiting out. A bunch of guides on the hill, they've got their swirl rangefinders and all that stuff. And then this guy has a Gunwerks setup with a Gunwerks rangefinder, but he's not using a BDC turret. He's using a MOA turret with his rangefinder set up to spit out MOA. And his wife that was with him had the rangefinder, the data. So waiting all day. Woman doesn't have the same options as the men when it comes to bathroom breaks. So she's got to hike down the other side of the hill, find a private place. She takes a bathroom break. While she's gone, Bull steps out. And here's the guy with the gun. Bull steps out. He's there. He's in killing range. He's got all these rangefinders. Guess what?
No one has MOA.
No ballistic solution.
Yeah.
And if he would have had a ballistic turret on there, he would have had a dead bull. And that was if I remember correctly, that was a no-go, and they didn't find success on that hunt.
Man.
Just an example. You can do the quick example of a bull in a meadow. You've got him dialed in. He runs off to the edge to sniff a cow right before he steps in. If you've got yards, you can just say that was 30 yards, shoot. But if it's minutes, like you're having to go to get a new dope and grab the calculation or find that conversion. So there's just a couple examples of where the language of the hunter, like a real hunter that's a killing machine, like not a recreational hunter that goes out once a year and does a lot of competition shooting, like a real hunter, like he is going to gravitate towards the success that a BDC turret will bring. Like you just see it. You see it in the data. That's why Gunwerks is so successful in that high-end hunting space.
And we see that sometimes in class where we're not trying to change everybody's way they shoot. We're trying to give them the best solution, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of guys are stuck on the MOA, and we're trying to tell them, I love that, but your guides are going to be talking in yards.
Yeah, it's the backup.
Yeah.
So if you look at all the new Revic Accura scopes, okay, a couple things that I'll point out. Number one, we only do first focal plane. This is another qualifier that you as a hunter should make on, is this service provider on it? Is he really worried about my success, or is he just selling me the easiest path? If they're giving you a second focal plane scope, then they don't know. They're setting you up for failure, a very likely failure in a tough shot with some wind at a intermediate distance. Like, you will have a failure because you won't be able to do the corrections for a lower magnification and the new subtension of the reticle. Mm-hmm. So that's another one that should disqualify somebody. If they're selling you a second focal plane scope, then all they care about is getting your dollars. Right? Mm-hmm. Period. So Revic, first focal plane, you're going to have a reticle with good subtensions, clean, simple. It's going to be windage holds, not a lot of elevation stuff, right? Because we're going to dial elevation. Holding elevation is not good, right? That's another example of a company that doesn't care if you're being successful or not, is they're going to teach you how to hold over instead of dial. So you go to the turret, you're going to have an MOA set of numbers, and then you're going to have these new BDC rings. So this BDC ring is cheap. They're $25. So you make a ballistic solution for your rifle. It's all trued out. You put that BDC ring on there as a backup. You can run MOA all day long, but as a backup, you've got the yards there to use. And I think most people would find with a Revic Smart Range out of your rangefinder and a BDC turret, that's probably the fastest, easiest way to do corrections. But if you're hung up on MOAs, fine, do it. But go ahead and install that $25 backup. So when the shit hits the fan, you've got one more.
It's again like having a drop chart in your bino harness in case stuff goes down.
Yeah.
I had something, I can't remember where we were going with your story. Oh, it just brought to mind again the baseline of being able to input your inputs of where you got your data from and your true ballistics. Brian was teaching a class. So Brian, our training director, is teaching a class, and I got a call from a student that I'm good relationship with this guy, so I'm going to answer it. I'm in the back. And I answer it, and he's whispering to me. He's like, hey, I've got a bull at 720 yards or whatever it was, He's like, I just want to make sure, can I use my BDC turret? It's cut for Virginia at 100 feet. And I said, well, you did get one of our BR4s, right? And he said, yeah. It's like, you inputted everything? Yeah. I was like, then take the shot, man. And him and his dad both doubled up on these elk. And I just thought that was the coolest example of having our baseline, entering in the BDC and using our rangefinder.
It also points out how important it is to become confident in your equipment, to know what it does, and to be confident. And that's why I've found that we teach more and more of the fundamental information, right? And we open it up and we expose people to more stuff. Like, you go to the Smart Scope, the Revic Radical, like we open up almost everything to the shooter, from click value to turret calibration to zero angle stuff to everything. And we're putting out we're opening up this really, really technical information, because I feel like the more that we can make that available to the shooter, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can always do the turnkey, here it is, just dial and shoot approach. But for the guys that really want to dig in, you cannot find a more technically advanced set of equipment than the Acura, BLR10B or BR4 or the Radical in combination as work streams. Like, there's so many Easter eggs in that, plus the app. Like, it is very, very sophisticated if you want to go there. But at the same time, like that final work stream is, how far is it? 725 shoot dead. Like,
so So maybe go into the Radical a little bit, because we've got our ballistic calculator, we've got a BDC that gives us a baseline for our BR4 or BLR10B. We've also got the BDR, where you can interchange your BDC ring. Yep. And now we've got the Radical.
Yep.
So why the Radical over, or, if someone's trying to decide, think about the progression though. Like, go to a drop chart or a ballistic calculator solution, so an app or a Kestrel or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So in that situation, let's just assume we're a traditional shooter-spotter pair. Right? In what situation?
In a shooting situation, you've got a traditional shooter-spotter pair.
Okay.
The spotter is going to have, very likely, he's going to have the app or the Kestrel, and he's going to be controlling that information.
Sure.
The shooter on his side, he has nothing.
Just looking at the animal.
He's got a reticle and he's got a turret, but he has no data about what he needs to do.
Okay.
And so all of that information has to come from the spotter. If you put a BDC ring on there, now he's got control over at least a portion of his elevation correction, right? So now the spotter's got this, here's a portion of that control. You go to the Radical, now you've got the elevation correction and all the ballistics that go with it. So you don't even have to have a true up. Like, if it's 800 yards, you can dial to 800 yards, ballistics are done. And you have the wind correction built in there. So you think about the shift in technology is essentially moving more and more of the control or the access to data to the shooter. And that comes from myself being in situations where that waiting that extra second for that my spotter to give me that last piece of data cost me a scenario, more than once. And so that's where bringing that onto the device and giving me that ability. And now with that Radical, there's no need for a smart rangefinder. So that guy that's got a Swaro that's just a dumb rangefinder or whatever, like, that information is usable across all fronts.
And how? That's guys who don't know how the Radical works.
Okay. So essentially what you're doing in the Radical is you're dialing the computer. So you've got a heads-up display that you're looking at in the scope. When you're looking at the target, there's the heads-up display, there's the computer. You're dialing until the display says the range to target. So any rangefinder can collect the line of sight range to target. You know that range, you dial the turret until the computer says that range, and then all of the ballistics have been done. So it's measuring your weather station, it's measuring the azimuth and the incline. So most of your shot vector does not measure range, right? That's an external input. But then it has your wind solutions in there. It's got everything.
So inclinometer, weather station, weather suite.
So pressure, temperature, all that stuff.
Yep. So And then it has your ballistic information inside of it.
Yep, you've used the app to program your profile so it knows exactly what your true inputs are.
So when that animal's at 800 yards and I dial up to 800, it could be, that is 800 for your gun, your bullet, these atmospheric conditions.
Down to the
click value. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah.
You with the temperature factor of your powder, with everything. Like it's the stuff.
If you're a BR4 guy or BLR10B guy, you are still having to laze it yourself or have the guide laze it for you.
Yeah.
With the Radical, he lazes it with his own whatever gear, and you just dial.
Yeah, you don't have to hand off your kit. He can use whatever rangefinder he's got.
And to me, that's the big advantage right there.
And I think most of the guys that are traveling the world and hunting, like they're bringing their rangefinder, and then it's like, I've heard so many stories. Okay, trying to teach the guide how to tell them the information that the rangefinder gets.
Yeah.
And
disconnect.
Yeah. And sometimes the language, like they can say yards, but they can't tell you anything else because they don't understand, right? Or the language barriers or whatever. So I really feel like that, pushing that into the Radical's value. Now, here's how I approach things. I've got that Radical. I've got all that smart stuff built into it. I've got that display. Guess what? I'm still putting a BDC turret on it.
Battery goes down?
Yep. It's total backup. It's like I'm still putting that turret on. It's cost $25.
Yeah.
It's super simple. So now I've got the ballistic data ring. I've got the ballistic computer. And then guess what? My bino that I'm going to use, the Revic bino, it also has a ballistic solution that can output the shoot to range and the MOAs. And I've got an MOA turret on there. So I have all of these different systems that are working together, providing solutions and then providing backup solutions. Because I've also been in those situations where something comes apart, and then now what do we do?
Mm-hmm. And with any technology, it takes some practice. The only thing that I tell guys when they're using a BLR10B and a Radical, or it was the PMR, was don't double them up.
Yeah.
Right? Like use that rangefinder.
Yeah, you have to use your line of sight range, not your
corrected to.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on from there. How about just how we train differently? I know, the curriculum has developed, and Aaron's actually come in and checked on how we're, teaching stuff. He says, hey, that's not how I had it a year ago. You're going to change it back. So,
well, I got to fight against, like, you guys were trained differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and Brian both served. Did you do Marines?
Yep.
And Brian was Marines.
Yep. Same deal. Yep.
So you guys, and I've seen this with some of the other guys that had military training, that you guys get taught a certain way and you struggle to get out of that. Mm-hmm. Like this dope card thing with you is a struggle.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Oh, we had 50 pages of dopes.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And all you needed was two numbers.
Well, that's
what's your velocity and your BC.
And I realize it now, and I say, how stupid was what we were doing?
But think about
not everything.
But guys are still training that way.
Yes, agreed. Okay. We didn't have a rangefinder that gave us.
I know.
Ballistic solutions. So yeah. So anyway, we were trained differently.
So I would say there is one very significant A/B difference. Is a training program that does not have the influence of somebody like myself that calls bullshit on stupid, extra, wasted effort is going to be more complex, with more steps, with more math, with less applicability. And so the problem is you'll go to a class and they'll get you on 1,000 yards and you'll think that this is the shit. And then you'll do all of their processes. And then when you go get in a real hunting situation, you fail because they have deprived you of the most modern, cutting edge, simplest, most effective work streams that exist. I would say that is probably the key and defining characteristic of our training programs is we teach you these simplistic systems that require very little in situ skill set or training developments. Like literally all you have to do is learn how to get steady, how to guess that wind speed, and break the trigger. Because everything else is straightforward. Range, ballistics, like everything else is straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably the biggest difference. And so we've tried to bake this into a progressive learning experience that gives you like true, real fundamentals. Like I'll defend anything that we do in front of the biggest experts in the world anytime. Like our system it's absolutely solid. So we'll give you these true fundamentals. We'll expose you to very, very elevated concepts about like, what is BC? Where does it come from? And what is a drag model? How does Mach number affect your drag, et cetera? Like we'll show you all of these details with the idea that if it's buried into your mind, right? Someday when you're having some trouble, you will be able to logically troubleshoot what's going on and to be able to derive a logical solution for that, right? That's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Or you'll be able to set up your system or whatever it is. Those tool sets are buried there. But then we'll take you through further and further simplification, right, of those fundamentals and the application of those fundamentals to develop a very sophisticated work stream that is 100% engineered for killing shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like this isn't like fancy pants, kind of stuff. This is how do I put that trophy on the wall or that meat in my freezer? That's what everything's been designed around. And it's been tested and refined over nearly 2 decades and so many experiences that it's embarrassing to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference.
Well, I guess what I want to say with that, or my response to that, is that working here for 4 years, I've learned a lot and learned that is the truth. I've learned, I almost want to defend the sniper community in a little bit.
I wasn't bagging the sniper community.
I know you're not.
The real key difference here is you guys will train and you will train and you will train, and it is your sole focus and goal in life, and you will train. Your capability is completely different. Your environment of what you have to do when you have to do it is completely different. Deer don't shoot back. That's different. And so this the difference between the professional that goes hunting once in a while and the professional that shoots all the time. Those systems and methods are different. You cannot apply this to this person or he will fail. That's the difference. It's not, this is not good or this doesn't work. That is not what I meant to say. And if that came across that way, it's not what I meant. It's just, you cannot take that where you are truly a professional and try to apply those same processes and techniques and expect the same outcome on somebody that has very little time and opportunity to train.
Has 4 days to learn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I want to jump in, or I say defend the sniper community. I don't mean that you're insulting them. I mean that because of what we have, we learn the old way.
Yeah.
And now that I've come to outside and into the civilian market and into an advanced company like this, I realize, man, we're missing a lot.
Yeah.
And some of those SF units and stuff, they might have some of this stuff. Actually, we've had guys talk to us about using the BR4s and whatnot. But if we could have had BR4s in our platoon,
imagine that.
Oh my gosh.
But even then, I still don't think that you could get away from that level of training and knowledge that you would need to bake in. Because what if it goes down? It's not like, oh, you go home empty-handed. Somebody dies.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's still different.
Yeah. I got you. I know you weren't bashing. I just want to show the difference. And I almost want to say to the sniper community, get on board. Like, let's even the low budget Marine Corps, whatever you can do. Let's get those guys, like it'll help. But anyway, the training's come a long way, even in the 4 years that I've been here, as the technology has developed and it has become simple. As long as my whole point is that like anyone can shoot long range if you know how and you have the right tools.
It's so simple to do it right. It's frustrating for me when people struggle, that aren't part of our circle. It's like, it's frustrating that they go through that struggle because they could have just short-circuited it, invest the money to come to level 1 and short-circuit all of that learning and spend and pain that you're going to go through watching the wrong YouTube videos trying to set up your system.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll call that a selling point or something, but to LRU to me is been an eye opener, and it shows me how many people just have not been told the right information.
Yes.
They come here, here's this, Aaron's done it step by step by step. Brian, our training director, step by step by step. It's become this working machine. You come in, you leave, you know how to shoot.
Yep.
You know how to shoot your web system out to long range.
Well, and think about like 5 years ago, I was still doing all the training.
Yeah.
Like, in addition to everything else. Think about the time that we have, like you and Brian and Jeremy, 3 people full-time dedicated to this. Like, now we have professionals. That's all they do. So you're going to be better at it. And you guys do a great job.
Thanks, Aaron. Better at it than you, is that what you're saying? Base wind versus vector wind. I haven't had enough experiences. I'll take it back, Aaron.
This is an advantage that I have. Number 1, I have an engineering mindset and background.
Yes.
So that gives me a leg up in being able to process and communicate concepts to people. Number 2, my experiences.
Yeah.
I wonder how many more animals I've shot than you. I'm guessing it's obscene. And really, it's not the successes from that is the learning experiences. It's all the times I screwed up.
Sure.
Like, that used to be half of what I would train in class was stories about how I screwed up and how you apply this technique, you won't make that same mistake.
Sure.
And to me, those were the most effective things. And that's where that experience has value, is because it just increases like your opportunities to learn. But I mean, those are 2 advantages that it's very hard to replicate, for yourself. But your experience and background in education also contributes. And that's why you guys do such a great job, is because there's all of that information, and you're able to rely on me for a lot of the other truths that I've been able to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Experience is key. And so you come to the class, great, but come to it a couple times, or go home and
the
practice.
Guys that came 5 or 6 years ago, they have no idea.
Right.
Like it's hard to go back and invest that money again, but it is worth it. Like, even if you just come back, pick up level 2 and then snag a level 3 up on Sheep Mountain, like the guys from 5 years ago didn't have that opportunity. That is next level stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Aaron. And I want to end on with exactly what you're talking about with guys coming in, repeat class guys. There's a guy, his name's Luke. He's been a Gunwerks friend, and he's been 3 times to LRU now, level 1, level 2. And he was sitting in the back class. We're doing introductions. And he goes, "Hey, my name's Luke." And he starts off with this. He says, "I want to tell you how big of a waste of money Gunwerks LRU is. I've been here 3 times now, and every big hunt I've been on, 3 big elk, one was at 175, one was 120 yards, and one was 45 yards, something like that. So I'm back for more." The whole system and every one of his big hunts have been these nice, easy shots. So anyway, thanks, Aaron. I think the development that or advancement that Gunwerks has taken, and then how LRU has developed and, hopefully made better hunters out there and better long range shooters. I think we've
changed the whole industry, Ian. Like our guys that have funded our R&D efforts, that have come to our classes and learned our stuff. Like, I can think of books that have been spawned by class members. I can think of companies that have been created by people that we've trained. Like that, like we have affected the industry, and you guys have been a big part of that with the training program. So it is huge. The number of people we run through there and the amount of good information that we put out it has an effect.
Heck yeah. Well, it's good to hear. And you see it. So thanks. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. And, keep training. Come to LRU. And keep asking us questions on our emails. We'll try and create podcasts out of some of your guys' questions. And hopefully we've answered some today. So thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome. Thank you. If you like what you're hearing here, please take a second and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate your feedback and suggestions for topics you'd like discussed or questions you want answered on the podcast. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram or send us an email to podcast@gunwerks.com. Also, be sure and check out our full offering of long-range gear at gunwerks.com. Use promo code LRP for free shipping on any order.